Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and welcome to my astrology channel. On this video, I'm going to be looking at Pisces, your month ahead, February 2021. Well, February is entirely different from January. So if you had a bit of a rough January, and I think most of us did, things are greatly improved. With Mercury retrograde right from the start of the month, you might think that that's a wrong forecast, but I'm one of those astrologers who does have some positive points about a retrograde Mercury. I mean, you can't get away from the fact that there will be some delays and diversions and the usual problems of trying to get hold of people and having to cancel dates and things like that. It's very typical of a retrograde Mercury. But there are advantages. And when Mercury is moving backwards, you get to go over old ground. And considering January was such a difficult month, there may have been many things that you wish to reconsider, maybe go back over. And also, of course, on a retrograde Mercury, we can visit the past. The past comes back to us in some way, often in a very positive kind of way. We run into someone we haven't seen for ages, someone gets in touch with us from the past. We even do things or go places that have meant something to us in the past, and they play into our future. That's the thing to remember. There are no coincidences, so that element of the past that's coming back to you in February is of purpose. It's for the now. You're meant to either wrap it up, re-look at it and put it away again, or it's going to come and have a part to play in your future. Now, the other thing about February is that we have a lot of planets in Aquarius. We have about 5 planetary bodies altogether. And in December, Saturn and Jupiter's arrival in Aquarius really marked the beginning of this new age of Aquarius. And you don't just step into a new age, immediately. It takes a while. Things tend to come about over a very long period of time. But given that we have the sun and a new moon in Aquarius, Venus and Mercury, Jupiter and Saturn, everything in Aquarius, we're going to get quite an introduction to elements of what the age of Aquarius may have to show us. Now, let me bring your chart into the mix so that we can see what I mean, what I'm talking about. So you can see this grouping of planets, and I referred to this in my last monthly video for you. And when you've got a lot of planets all bunched together, it is an intense kind of experience. So things are still quite intense in February, but they've changed their tune. They're not quite the same as they were when we were dealing with such a lot of very difficult Capricorn energy. Now we've got this Aquarius energy. Aquarius is an air sign, so it's much lighter. Now, Aquarius for you always sits in the 12th house. So you've got all these planets in your 12th house. And that's, I often refer to this as the house of secrets and shadows. But a lot of things take place in the 12th house. There's a lot of distillation and processing going on. And perhaps to a certain extent, because the sun comes into your sign on the 18th of February, you're going to be looking back on 2020 and sifting through the things that happened. So you're looking at your experience and you're reprocessing. And that's a good thing. It's like we always need to process an experience so that we can put it somewhere and move on. So that's a really, really big theme for February as a whole. But also, I think a lot is going to happen during the year, really, with that whole idea of kind of tying things up and going back to the past, looking at them and putting them away. And that's a good way of looking at what happens during the month of February, whether people come back into your life or the things that come into your life take you back to some kind of point where that process of distillation and processing can occur. Now, in the first part of the month, Venus comes into the 12th house, and she's going to remain in the 12th house until she arrives in your sign pretty well at the very end of the month. Now, because this is the area of secrets and shadows, sometimes things seem to go rather pear-shaped with a relationship. So if you're one of those Pisceans who feels that a relationship has gone into the chiller. It's not warm and vibrant as it once was. The reason is, or we're looking at Venus in the 12th house, but it's also a time of transition. As I often say, when we're transitioning through something, we just have to let it be. We can't control it. We can't steer our ship. We have to wait until it's done what it's going to do. And perhaps a relationship needs to go through this transitional period in order to become something different at the end of it. It's going to take you somewhere else. Now, of course, Valentine's Day happens during this period, and Venus will be in the 12th house. So, although you can't say this across the board for all Pisceans, it may be that this is a bit of a sotto voce Valentine's Day for you. Maybe not a lot goes on, or maybe there are memories and feelings that kind of come into this period of time, and they make you feel a little melancholic. You're not jumping around for joy. Now, of course, you may have Aquarius rising or Aquarius in your 7th house, which would make that trend a little different. And instead, what you'd be doing is celebrating like mad. So there can be some differences here, but the general view for Pisces is that, something, your time will come. The time for romance and celebration and relationships is going to be a lot more like March. So bear with those ups and downs of relationships and romance during the month of February. Venus also meets with Uranus here on the 6th and 7th of February. That happens to be a weekend. So this is a very interesting time for a relationship. Certainly, if you meet someone at this time, this is going to be a very complex and intense relationship, and you won't be able to steer it. It will just go its own way. But it may be that at this particular time, there are other things that really seem to come to a kind of crossroads, and you may be torn between what you usually do or what you used to do, or things that you associate with that situation or that relationship, and now it's changed gear, or it can't continue in the same way that it was. And the idea is, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this conflict really between the old and the new, which is personified, exemplified by Saturn in one sign, Uranus in another, and they're at cross purposes. That the old really does have to give way to the new, and if you remember that, you won't go far wrong. What I also think about this particular time of the year, Venus has a long way to go until it comes into your sign. So I think we need to consider here as well the idea that there's time to play for. If a situation develops, especially regarding a romance in February, and you're not initially terribly happy about it, give it time. This show has a little longer to run before you can really make a judgment on it. Now, as I said, Mercury will be retrograde all the way through, pretty well until the 21st of February. But during this time, it does conjoin Jupiter, and it will do this on the 14th of February, which is, of course, Valentine's Day. And I want you to look back and see if you can connect these two dates. If we connect around January the 12th, a communication that you had, a conversation that you had, something that happened around that point, returns for a review on about Valentine's Day. And remember, Mercury will be retrograde at that point. It still has to go direct over the same point, which it will do in March. So it's an unfinished story, but you may be able to connect the dots between January the 12th and February the 14th. Also around the 14th, the weekend that is Valentine's weekend, a couple of days before that, Venus and Jupiter conjoined in Aquarius, and there was a new moon in Aquarius as well. So there was a really profound level of emphasis on this sign, and in a good way. Venus-Jupiter conjunctions are always good news. Even if they present with situations you may not be over the moon about at the time, I promise you they're good news. In the future, good things will come out of what happens around this time in February. And even if the 11th of February isn't Valentine's Day itself, it's very near it, and these influences will still be in play. Now, I can almost hear some of you screaming at me and saying, couldn't give two hoots about Valentine's Day. That's not what I'm into. I've got family issues, I've got job issues, I've got financial issues, I've got all sorts of things that are much, much more important than that. Well, even those can be considerably helped by this combination of Venus-Jupiter conjunction and a moon in Aquarius. And what I want to say to you is, particularly on the 11th, if you're in a situation that's a little bit stuck, whatever it is, whether it is financial or it is to do with family or whatever else it may be, do something really in the sense of making some kind of statement about the situation on the 11th. Do something, make a phone call, send an email, do some research, change something, do something profound on the 11th, because you're doing it at a super powerful time, and things will come from your actions, even if they don't shift a situation right away, or you get to see the results of your actions right away. You will get results from those actions. Now, there's another point that I really want to look at here. Well, I mentioned that the sun will come into your sign on the 18th of February, and it will start, that it will start to move through that sign, and in its wake will come Venus and Mercury ultimately. But here we have what we can see is a full moon, and that full moon takes place on the 27th. In other words, the sun is in your sign of Pisces, and the moon is in the opposite sign of Virgo. Now, when we have a full moon, we reach completion, and that's a good thing. We talk a lot about closure and completion, don't we? Especially, I've been talking about distillation and processing things, during the month of February. But really, on a full moon, we get to say, I'm done now. And it means we're free to move on. And that can be a really positive statement. But also, full moons are a very good time to sign contracts or to shake hands on a deal or do something that really makes an agreement finite. Another good property of the full moon. But of course, sometimes we get over emotional at a full moon. It seems to up the ante, the emotional ante. Sometimes, again, in a good way, how we say we cried tears of joy. But other times we really get bent out of shape on a full moon when the emotions are full tilt. This is flanking the relationship axis. So in terms of closure and completion, it's a good time to set the seal on a deal, whether it's a business agreement, whether it's some other kind of agreement between you and another person, or whether we are really well and truly in the area of relationships. And, the idea of endings and beginnings, which is such a part of the full moon, new moon cycle. If we go back to the new moon in Virgo, and that was on the 17th of September last year, we may be seeing the culmination of a series of events that have gone on from that mid-September point. So it's good, as I said, to close a deal. But occasionally closing a deal means saying, we're done, we're dusted, it's over. I'd like to think that that could be something that you do with, with a kind of good heart. You recognize the time for something to be over has come. But sometimes endings are painful, and we have to go through a process of, getting over it and moving forward. And I think that in a way, that's where I want to end here, because I want to talk just a little bit more about this Saturn-Uranus aspect, which is exact on the 17th of February. This Saturn-Uranus square is with us on and off for the whole year, and it's going to, as I say, place its signature on the year every bit as much as the Saturn-Pluto conjunction did on the year 2020. And I talked briefly about the idea of the old giving way to the new. It's never as simple as that, because sometimes when something goes, it ends, it fades, it's broken, it can't be used anymore, we don't initially have a replacement. And that can happen with a relationship, it can happen with a job, all sorts of things. So there's a degree of time before we see the new coming through. But my goodness, the new is coming through. It's just going to take time for that to occur. So I think with lots of things during the course of 2021, you're going to have to be patient with the things that end or the things that don't seem to be working very well, because they're in the process of becoming something different. And we just have to wait until we've gone through a few more weeks and months before we're ready for that new thing. So Pisces, that's the month. I would say the month in brief, but I think in a way it's the month in depth. And of course, there are my other videos, new moon, full moon, give you a little bit more of a picture of what's going on the world stage as well. Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye for now.